Reddit stories, creepiest and most disturbing unsolved mysteries. The Ibadan Forest of Horror in Nigeria. A local taxi driver goes missing and his friends create a makeshift search party and investigate a forest. Instead of finding their friend, they find an abandoned school, or factory, that have the remnants of a hellish torture, murder, ritual killing and human trafficking. 8 survivors were rescued. Numerous body parts, rotting corpses and personal artifacts were found. The perpetrators were never found, although local politicians and ritualists were suspects. Whilst this discovery is disturbing, the mystery for me is that the original taxi driver still hasn't been found. The activities that occurred in the forest are believed to have been coordinated by unknown kidnappers and ritualists in the state who are often patronized by some affluent Nigerians and politicians who use human flesh for rituals. It's like the sick fucks, who are also rich and or powerful, eventually require some grotesque and evil stuff to get their jollies. According to Wikipedia, the discovery of the Forest of Horror generated controversy throughout Nigeria. There was a concern on the link between the management, kidnappers and ritualists of the horror forest and some top government officials and notable politicians in the state, but there seems to be no clear evidence to establish that fact. There was a claim by the youth in the area that the Oyo State Police Command refused to investigate the forest despite several kidnapping cases reported in the state. Some of the survivors rescued from the den claimed that the ritualist kidnapped victims by claiming to be the officials of the Urban Renewal Initiative coordinated by the Oyo State government. Jessica Chambers. She was set on fire in her car and had gasoline poured down her throat. Paramedics found her walking down the lane on fire. The only part of her body that wasn't burned was the bottom of her feet. She did not survive. Police found a suspect but did not have enough evidence to charge him. Paramedics were so traumatized by what they saw, they had to go through therapy, and broke down on stage during interviews. She tried to name her attacker, but her throat was so destroyed, she couldn't be understood. I'm going to assume she couldn't write anything due to how severe her burns were. Man, that's such a fucking awful way to go. They have a suspect they took to trial twice. Yup, he's also been on trial since 2019 for torturing stabbing a woman to death in her apartment for her debit card PIN. For some reason, still no trial for her murder. The last thing I could find was an article in October 2021 saying that his trial for Jessica was set for January 2022. There's surprisingly a lack of court coverage urgency for this case. Which is strange since this man is a known criminal who's strongly suspected to have brutally murdered 2 women. You'd think there'd be more press media still. Las Cruces Bowling Alley Massacre. In February 1990, in Las Cruces, New Mexico, 2 intruders entered the bowling alley through an unlocked door before opening time. The cook, Ida Hogan, was forced by one gunman to go to the office where Stephanie Sinak, her 12-year-old daughter Melissa Repass, and Melissa's 13-year-old friend Amy Hauser were being held by the other gunman. The women and girls were forced to lie on the ground while the gunman stole $4, $5K from a safe. The alley's pin mechanic, Steve Darren, arrived at the alley with his daughters, 6-year-old Paula and 2-year-old Valerie, who he'd been unable to find a babysitter for. The gunman then shot everyone. The gunman haphazardly set fire to the office, but it didn't burn much. After they left, 12-year-old Melissa was able to call the police despite being shot 5 times. She and the cook would survive their wounds. Melissa's mother, Stephanie Sinak, would initially survive, but would succumb to complications 9 years later. 2-year-old Valerie would survive long enough to be taken to the hospital, but died there. The gunmen have never been identified. After the incident, Stephanie Sinak's father, Ronald Sinak, who I believe owned the bowling alley and was out of state at the time of the killings, didn't cooperate with authorities. Some believe that the killings might have been a targeted hit on retaliation against Ronald for something he did. That's awful. A family goes to a bowling alley to have some fun, and this happens. They worked there. The incident happened before opening. I lived in Las Cruces for over a decade. The bowling alley was still up and running until COVID. I had friends who worked in the bar part who said it was haunted. The people who did it probably fled to Mexico, which is only 2 hours away depending how fast you're going. Crimes like these happen often there. My ex was a night auditor at a motel off the highway and was robbed and shot in the knee. Never found who did it. I worked at a shop in the same area and had an armed guy try to come in through the back door. We were really busy at the time, so I just shouted hell no and slammed the door in his face. Adrenaline, I guess. When I called the police, they never found the guy either. It's easy to jump off an exit, commit a robbery and jump back on and head to El Paso or Mexico in a short amount of time. The disappearance of Zeb Quinn. He was 18 years old when he went missing in 2000, was working his shift at a local Walmart and afterwards wanted to look at a new car with a colleague, when he allegedly received a call that made him take off frantically. After that he was never seen again. The strangest thing is that a few days later his car was found in a parking lot, with the headlights turned on, a pair of lips and an exclamation mark drawn on the back window in pink lipstick, and a live Labrador puppy sitting inside. In 2017 the colleague was arrested for his murder, but all the strange details still make no sense at all. That all just sounds so strange. Poor bloke, and his poor family. I doubt they'll ever get a proper answer. Not to mention that the prime suspect in that case was convicted of killing Christy Schoen, Food Network contestant, her husband and their child. Their bodies were found in the woods of his home. According to Wikipedia, at around 9 p.m., on Sunday, January 2, 2000, Zeb Quinn ended his shift at the electronics department of a Walmart in Asheville, North Carolina. At the time, Quinn had been enrolled in an ROTC program. He had plans to travel after work to Leicester with Robert Jason Owens, one of his co-workers, to buy a new car. Quinn met Owens in the Walmart parking lot before they drove separately to look at the vehicle. The two men were seen on surveillance footage at a nearby gas station at approximately 9:15 p.m., purchasing sodas at a convenience store. According to Owens, after leaving the gas station, Quinn signaled for him to pull over by flashing his headlights. Quinn told him that he had received a page and needed to return the call. After he returned from using a payphone, Owens described Quinn as frantic. Quinn told him that he needed to cancel their plans and eventually sped off, rear-ending Owens's truck. Hours later, Owens was treated at a hospital for fractured ribs and a head injury that he said he had sustained in a second car accident that evening. No accident report was filed with police. The following afternoon, Quinn's mother Denise Vlahakis filed a missing persons report. 2 days after he was last seen, a man purporting to be Quinn placed a phone call to the Walmart where he was employed. The man told Quinn's co-worker that he would not be coming to work because of illness, but the co-worker thought that the voice sounded unfamiliar and that it was not Quinn. The phone call was traced back to a Volvo plant where Owens worked. When questioned, Owens admitted making the phone call, claiming that he was doing his friend a favor after Quinn phoned and asked Owens to call in sick for him. The disappearance of Lars Mitnick, a German man who went on vacation in Bulgaria in 2014. He was last seen at the airport where he was brought into a private room by airport security after his mother had called telling them her son was behaving strangely, saying there were people after him over the phone the night before. A few minutes later, he's seen bolting, and I mean full-on sprinting out of the room without his luggage. He ran out of airport, scaled the huge fences around the perimeter and was never seen again. Hundreds of witnesses, CCTV footage and a police presence, and the man still basically disappeared off the face of the earth in broad daylight. What I think happened was Lars had to stay behind while his friends returned home, due to a perforated eardrum. He was prescribed an antibiotic for it, one which he might have had an allergic reaction to, causing some sort of psychosis. Didn't he get hit in the head in a bar fight a night or two before? He might have got his bell rung good to the tune of a concussion that led to psychosis. As a medical professional, it seems unlikely that an antibiotic reaction would cause psychosis or paranoia. What's more likely is that he got a head injury during the same fight that perforated his eardrum, and he was confirmed to have a head injury that caused the paranoia and psychosis. It's not uncommon for this to happen. Selena Mayes. A lesser known one that sticks with me is Selena Mayes, 12 years old, 9 months pregnant, disappears from her room overnight. She didn't bring any belongings with her, and neither she or the baby have ever been found. Her dad and his family were involved with a shady church, but there's no proof they know what happened to her. The obvious theory is that her baby's father killed her and hid the body to avoid statutory rape charges, but nobody knows, or will admit to knowing, anyhow, who he was. 12 years old, 9 months pregnant by an unknown person, forced to complete the pregnancy due to the family's religion, part of a church with a particularly authoritarian leader where she was also homeschooled, disappears overnight from her family home with nothing and no disturbance. That's a terrible story all around. Right, even if she wasn't raped by a church member, their beliefs would have made her especially vulnerable to a predator because she wouldn't have had the usual range of interactions with boys her own age. It's ironic how these extreme attempts to protect children so often end up doing the exact opposite. This reminds me of the sad story of Aretha Franklin, who first gave birth at age 12. Her Wikipedia entry says Aretha had a half-sister who was the child of her father, Reverend C.L. Franklin, and the mother was a 12-year-old girl who was a member of his church. The disappearance of Ben McDaniels. As a diver, I find the disappearance of Ben McDaniels to be super interesting. They say he went into a cave and never came out, but some of the world's top cave divers looked for him and never found a body. The only evidence that he went diving were staged gas bottles, but they were filled with normal air, not any sort of mixture or anything. The owner of Artex Springs, where Ben went missing, also died mysteriously the year after. He almost certainly drowned and had his body disposed of by local divers. It was one of the most popular dives in the country, and people didn't want his death to close it to the public, as that has happened plenty of times to other locations. Maybe the dive shop employee that saw him last passed a lie detector test and cadaver dogs didn't find anything at the surface. Eagle's Nest is probably the most famous cave in Florida that has been shut down due to fatalities, but has been reopened since 2003. More people have died in Eagle's Nest than Vortex Springs, and they had the precedent set already. Not to mention Vortex Springs has a locked fence blocking the cave entrance that Eagle's Nest doesn't have, so I don't think one death would have shut down Vortex, as proven by the 2012 death at the site, and we can all still go diving there today. The murder of Lindsay Buzzak, a case close to home for me that I don't see mentioned as much as it should. A relatively junior realtor in Victoria, British Columbia is showing a luxury home to some clients, and the clients murdered her. The clients, a man and a woman, cold called her saying they needed to find something to buy ASAP. She was apprehensive of showing the property by herself and asked that her boyfriend come or wait outside or something. Turns out the boyfriend was running late and arrived around as the murder just occurred, but I don't believe he saw anything as the suspects fled through the back door. It's believed that she was the victim of a professional hit for some unknown reason. Also, the cell phone that was used to contact her was purchased by someone with an alias in Vancouver 6 or so months prior and was only ever used to contact her. According to Wikipedia, Lindsay Elizabeth Buzzak was a Canadian real estate agent who was murdered on a property viewing in Massacre, a suburb of Victoria, British Columbia, on February 2, 2008 after being lured to meet a couple, a man and a woman, posing as prospective clients. They had told her they were looking for $1 million home. Buzzak was apprehensive about going to the viewing because of the odd way someone with her low profile had been contacted directly for such a large deal. However, she went despite her misgivings after being reassured. I think the boyfriend was involved. He showed up late and moved the car up the street for a while and then back in front of the house. If he was supposed to be there, why wouldn't he just go in like, "Hey, sorry, I'm late"? Sounds eerily similar to the murder of Al-Qaeda by Robert Cooper. The murderer used a fake name, was a prospective tenant, and used a prepaid cell phone purchase 6 months prior to contact his victim as well. I'm convinced the boyfriend and his mother are involved. Karla Gus. I am an avid Unsolved Mysteries reader, and I don't know why it has stuck with me, but Karla Gus, 16-year-old girl, called her stepmother to pick her up from a party, reportedly was too scared to sleep because she thought someone would kill her, and the next day she disappeared. There was some weird interviews and dynamics between step-parents and birth parents, and a bunch of theories abound. Her father was just arrested for corporal injury to spouse. No further details have been released, but that's a pretty scary charge. Seems like dad has anger issues and stepmom disliked the girl. Her poor mother. No theories. Stepmom did it. Crocodile tears. Says daughter liked to argue and steal her clothes. Hopes she's alright. Complains about searching. Says daughter was scared of dying. Paranoid? Trying to discredit the daughter. This woman is a fucking monster. I'm guessing she asked her stepdaughter to take a piece of paper down the street to a car that was waiting for the signal and they abducted. Her story doesn't add up. Thank you for watching and listening. Please subscribe to my channel for more creepy and disturbing mystery stories.